I'd been working as a housemaid for exactly 3 months when I learned that saving a child's life could be the most dangerous thing you've ever done. The scream that changed everything tore through the twilight like glass shattering, high, sharp, and wrong. I dropped the crystal vase I'd been polishing, my hands still damp from the marble hallway I'd just finished cleaning. The sound echoed from somewhere outside the Piccio estate, cutting through the evening silence like a blade. My feet moved before my mind caught up, racing through the mansion's corridors toward the source. The heavy oak doors to the terrace stood open, and beyond them, the pool's surface rippled with violent disturbance. A small figure thrashed beneath the water, Matteo, the 6-year-old heir to this fortress of marble and secrets. I didn't think. Couldn't think. My body launched forward, dress and all, into the chlorinated depths. The water was colder than I expected, shocking my system as I dove toward the sinking child. His small hands grasped desperately at nothing, his eyes wide with terror beneath the surface. I wrapped my arms around his fragile frame and kicked upward, my lungs burning as we broke through to air. On the pool's edge, I pressed my palms against his chest, counting compressions the way they'd taught us at the rescue shelter. 1, 2, 3, breathe. His lips were blue, his body too still. Come on, Matteo. Come on. Water spilled from his mouth as he coughed, then gasped, then cried. The most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The relief flooding through me was so intense I nearly collapsed. Matteo's small body shook against mine as he sobbed, his fingers clutching at my soaked uniform. I held him close, whispering the same words I used to say to my brother when nightmares woke him. You're safe now. You're okay. I've got you. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, expensive leather against wet stone. I looked up from where I knelt, soaked and trembling, to see a figure emerging from the mansion shadows. Oliviero Piccio stood silhouetted against the golden light spilling from the windows, his black tuxedo immaculate despite the chaos. The glow caught the sharp angles of his face, but his expression remained unreadable as carved stone. He should have been running, should have been frantic, grateful, desperate to hold his son. Instead, he approached with the measured pace of a man surveying property damage. His dark eyes swept over the scene, the disturbed water, his crying child, me kneeling in my ruined dress, and something cold settled in my stomach. Instead of rushing to his son, instead of gratitude or relief, he stopped 3 feet away and asked in a voice cold enough to freeze blood, "Who told you to touch my son?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I blinked up at him, water dripping from my hair, my arms still protective around the shivering child. "He was drowning," I whispered, my voice barely audible over Matteo's quiet sobs. That wasn't what I asked. Piccio's dark eyes studied me with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. There was no warmth there, no father's relief at his child's rescue. Only calculation. Only suspicion. Behind him, men in black suits materialized from the shadows like smoke given form, silent, watchful, waiting for orders. I hadn't even heard them approach. The night air suddenly felt thinner, charged with an electricity I didn't understand but instinctively feared. This wasn't gratitude. This was interrogation. "I heard him scream," I said, my voice stronger now despite the trembling in my hands. "I came running. He was underwater. What was I supposed to do? Let him drown?" Something flickered across Piccio's face. Surprise, maybe, at my defiance. Or perhaps annoyance that I dared to question him. Matteo's grip on my dress tightened, and I felt his small body press closer to mine, seeking shelter from his own father's coldness. "Take him inside," Piccio commanded without breaking eye contact with me. "Get him warm. Call Dr. Martinelli." Gentle but firm hands reached for Matteo, and I felt him resist, his fingers clutching desperately at my soaked uniform. "No," he whimpered. "Want to stay with Layla." The sound of my name on his lips seemed to cut through the tension like a knife. For just a moment, Piccio's mask slipped, and I saw something raw and unguarded flash across his features. Pain, maybe, or fear. Then it was gone, replaced by that same stone-cold composure. "Now," he said quietly, and the men moved forward. I watched helplessly as they lifted Matteo from my arms, his small voice calling my name until the mansion's doors swallowed the sound. The terrace fell silent except for the gentle lapping of pool water against tile and the distant hum of the city beyond the estate's walls. I remained kneeling by the pool as the night deepened around me, my wet dress clinging to my skin, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man who controlled half this city stood watching me with eyes that held secrets darker than the water I'd just pulled his son from. Water that reflected the mansion's lights like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. "Stand up," he said finally. I rose on unsteady legs, acutely aware of how I must look, hair plastered to my head, makeup smeared, uniform ruined. A servant who'd forgotten her place. But I met his gaze anyway, something stubborn and fierce rising in my chest. "You saved his life," Piccio said, and for a moment I thought I heard something almost like wonder in his voice. "Yes." "Why?" The question caught me off guard. "Because he's a child. Because he was drowning. Because it was the right thing to do." He studied me for a long moment, his head tilted slightly as if I were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "The right thing," he repeated, and there was something almost bitter in the way he said it. How refreshingly naive. Heat flared, in my cheeks. "I'm not naive. I'm human." In this house, Miss McGowen, those are often the same thing. The way he said my name, formal, distant, like a judge pronouncing sentence, sent a chill down my spine. He knew exactly who I was, had probably known from the moment he hired me. But there was something else in his tone now, something I couldn't quite identify. "Go inside," he said, turning away from me toward the pool. "Change your clothes. We'll speak in the morning." I hesitated, wanting to ask about Matteo, wanting to know if he was truly all right. But something in Piccio's posture, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides, warned me against pushing further. As I walked toward the mansion, I felt his eyes on my back like a weight. At the threshold, I turned back to see him standing motionless by the pool's edge, staring down into the water that had nearly claimed his son. In the golden light spilling from the windows, he looked less like the powerful man who controlled half the city and more like a father haunted by ghosts I couldn't see. And somehow, I knew that saving Matteo Piccio's life had just changed everything about my own. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs, should have questioned why a man like Oliviero Piccio would hire someone like me, a woman with no references, no experience in estates like this, and a past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. But desperation has a way of making us blind to red flags, and I'd needed this job more than I'd needed answers. Now, as I climbed the servants' stairs to my small room on the 3rd floor, water still dripping from my hair, I wondered if those answers were about to find me, whether I wanted them or not. Subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow's story unfolds darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than you think. Now, let's begin the tale. The morning arrived with an unnatural silence that pressed against my eardrums like cotton. I'd barely slept, replaying the events by the pool until they blurred together like watercolors in rain. Every creak of the old mansion made me jump, expecting Piccio's men to appear at my door with termination papers and a one-way ticket back to the life I'd fled. Instead, at precisely 7 a.m., a soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Miss McGowen?" The voice belonged to Harrison, the head butler whose silver hair and pressed uniform made him look like he'd stepped from a period drama. "Mr. Piccio requests your presence in the breakfast room." Requests. As if I had a choice. I dressed carefully in my spare uniform, hands trembling as I pinned my still damp hair into a neat bun. In the mirror, I looked pale but composed, a mask I'd perfected during my brother's trial, when reporters had shoved cameras in my face and demanded to know how it felt to have a criminal for family. The walk to the Uiwai breakfast room felt like a march to execution. Harrison led me through corridors I'd cleaned but never truly noticed, past portraits of past Piccio generations that lined the walls like silent judges. Each face bore the same aristocratic features, the same cold, calculating eyes that seemed to follow my movement. Generations of power, of control, of secrets buried so deep they'd become family heirlooms. The breakfast room was smaller than I'd expected, intimate in a way that felt more dangerous than the mansion's grand spaces. Piccio sat at the head of a mahogany table, cutting his eggs with surgical precision. He'd traded last night's tuxedo for a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire 3 months here. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, like a chess master considering his next move. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit." I chose the chair farthest from him, my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, broken only by the soft clink of his silverware against porcelain. "Coffee?" he asked, still not meeting my eyes. "No, thank you." "It wasn't really a question." He gestured to Harrison, who materialized with a cup and saucer as if he'd been waiting in the shadows. The coffee was perfect, rich, dark, exactly how I liked it, which meant they'd been watching me, learning my habits, cataloging my preferences like data points in a file. "How is Matteo?" I asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. "Alive, thanks to you." He finally looked up, those dark eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. "Tell me, Miss McGowen, where did you learn CPR?" The question I'd been dreading. "A first aid course." "Where?" I hesitated, knowing that any lie would unravel under his scrutiny. "At a volunteer program, after my brother was arrested." Something shifted in his expression, not surprise, but confirmation. He'd already known. This was a test, not an interrogation. "The Riverside Rescue Center," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You volunteered there for 8 months while your brother awaited trial, taught basic first aid to at-risk youth, helped with emergency response training." He took a sip of his coffee, never breaking eye contact. "You were good at it. The director wrote a glowing recommendation letter that you never used." Heat crept up my neck. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know everything about the people in my house." He set down his cup with deliberate care. "Your brother, Marcus McGowen, arrested for armed robbery of a convenience store. Sentenced to 5 years, currently serving time at Millbrook Correctional." Each word hit like a physical blow. I'd worked so hard to escape that shadow, to build something clean and new. But here it was, laid out like evidence at a crime scene. He was desperate, I said quietly. Not dangerous. Desperation makes men dangerous, Miss McGowen. It makes them unpredictable. Piccio leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. It also makes them useful, under the right circumstances. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean? It means you've been around criminals before. You understand how they think, how they operate. That's interesting. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I thought of Marcus, barely 19 and terrified, calling me from jail with a voice that cracked like a child's. He'd stolen $43 and a pack of cigarettes because our landlord was threatening eviction, and I was working 3 jobs that still weren't enough. My brother isn't like you, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Piccio's eyebrows rose slightly. Like me? Powerful. Connected. He didn't have choices. And you think I did? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I didn't understand. Before I could respond, the breakfast room door opened, and Matteo appeared in the doorway. He looked smaller in the morning light, fragile in his dinosaur pajamas, but his eyes were bright and alert. "Papa?" he said tentatively, then his gaze found mine. "Layla." He ran to me without hesitation, throwing his small arms around my waist with a force that nearly knocked me from my chair. I hugged him back instinctively, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the lingering antiseptic smell from the doctor's visit. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I whispered against his hair. "I had bad dreams about the water," he murmured. "But then I remembered you saved me." Over his head, I saw Piccio's expression harden. Not anger, exactly, but something colder. Calculation. His son had run to me, not to him. In a house where control was everything, that simple gesture had shifted the balance of power. "Matteo," Piccio said quietly. "Come here." The boy hesitated, his grip on my uniform tightening. "Can Layla come too?" "No. Just you." I gently disentangled myself from Matteo's embrace, giving him what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "Go to your father, honey. I'll see you later." He walked to Piccio reluctantly, and I watched as the man's entire demeanor softened when his son climbed into his lap. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the father beneath the facade, protective, loving, terrified of losing the one thing that mattered more than his empire. "Miss McGowen," Piccio said, his voice carefully neutral as Matteo settled against his chest. "You'll remain close to my son. For now." It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't trust. It was a command wrapped in necessity, and we both knew it. "Of course, Mr. Piccio. And Miss McGowen?" He looked at me over Matteo's head, his eyes holding a warning I couldn't quite decipher. "In this house, curiosity is a luxury you can't afford. Remember that." As I left the breakfast room, I heard Matteo's voice, soft and trusting. "Papa, why don't you like Layla? She saved me." I didn't wait to hear the answer. But as I walked back, through those portrait-lined corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been given a reprieve, not a pardon. And somewhere in this mansion of rules and secrets, a clock was ticking toward a reckoning I wasn't prepared for. 3 days passed in careful routine. I cleaned, I watched Matteo, I pretended not to notice the way Piccio's men tracked my movements through the mansion like shadows with eyes. The normalcy felt fragile, like walking on ice that could crack at any moment. Matteo had taken to following me everywhere, his small hand often finding mine as we moved through the house. He'd chatter about dinosaurs and space rockets, while I dusted furniture worth more than most people's cars, his presence the only bright spot in a world that felt increasingly suffocating. It was Thursday morning when everything shattered. I was returning from the garden where I'd been hanging laundry when I spotted the envelope near the front gate. Cream-colored paper, expensive stock, with O Piccio written in elegant script across the front. No postmark, no return address. Someone had delivered it by hand. My first instinct was to leave it for the guards, but something about the way it lay there, so deliberately placed, so perfectly positioned, made me pick it up. The paper felt heavy between my fingers, weighted with more than just expensive stationery. I found Marco, Piccio's lieutenant, in the kitchen reviewing security schedules with 2 other men. He was younger than I'd expected for someone in his position, maybe early 30s, with intelligent eyes and the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly how dangerous he could be. "This was by the gate," I said, holding out the envelope. Marco's expression shifted the moment he saw it. The casual conversation died instantly. He took the envelope with careful fingers, as if it might explode, then looked at me with new intensity. "You touched this?" Yes. Should I not have?" He didn't answer, just turned to one of the other men. "Get the boss. Now." Within minutes, the kitchen had transformed into a command center. Piccio appeared in shirt sleeves, his usual composure cracked around the edges. He took the envelope from Marco without a word, studying the handwriting with the focus of a man reading his own death warrant. When he opened it, I watched his face go completely still. Not angry, not surprised, just empty, like someone had switched off a light behind his eyes. "What does it say?" Marco asked. Piccio's voice was barely above a whisper. "You should have let the boy drown." The words hit the room like a physical force. I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications crashed over me. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen me save Matteo and wished I hadn't. "Lock it down," Piccio said, his voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "Full security protocol. No one in or out without my authorization." The mansion erupted into controlled panic. Men appeared from nowhere, speaking into radios, checking windows, securing doors. I stood frozen in the middle of it all, clutching a dish towel like a lifeline, trying to process what was happening. "You." Piccio's voice cut through the noise. He was looking directly at me, his eyes holding an accusation that made my stomach clench. "My office. Now." The walk to his office felt like a death march. 2 guards flanked me, their presence making it clear this wasn't a request. Piccio's office was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room where important decisions were made and lives were changed with the stroke of a pen. He closed the door behind us with deliberate care, then turned to face me. The man who had questioned me over breakfast was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. "How long have you been working for them?" he asked. "Working for who? I don't understand." "The note, Miss McGowen. Someone knew you saved my son. Someone who wanted him dead." He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or rage. That kind of information doesn't just appear. It has to be fed. "You think The accusation hit me like a slap. "You think I'm working with whoever sent this?" "I think coincidences are rare in my world. I think a woman with a criminal brother who appears in my house just weeks before someone tries to kill my son is worth questioning." Heat flared in my chest, burning away the fear. "I saved your son's life." Maybe that was the plan. Save him, earn my trust, get close to him. His voice was clinical, detached, like he was discussing the weather. "Then finish what the drowning started. That's insane." I stepped back, hitting the door with my shoulders. "I would never hurt a child. Never." "Prove it." "How?" He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face for something I couldn't name. "Tell me about the night you found him. Every detail, every thought that went through your head." So I did. I told him about the scream, about the way my body moved before my mind caught up, about the terror in Mateo's eyes beneath the water. I told him about the CPR training, about the volunteers at the rescue center who taught me that every life was worth saving, no matter the cost. When I finished, the office was silent except for the distant sound of guards moving through the house. Piccio had moved to the window, his back to me, his hands clasped behind him like a general surveying a battlefield. "My wife drowned in that pool," he said quietly. 3 years ago. An accident, they said. But I've learned that in my world, accidents are often carefully orchestrated. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, his coldness by the pool made sense. The way he'd looked at the water like it was an enemy. The fear beneath his anger. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Are you?" He turned back to me, and for just a moment I saw past the mask to the man beneath, broken, haunted, terrified of losing the only family he had left. "Or are you exactly what someone wants me to believe you are?" Before I could answer, a knock interrupted us. Marco entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. "Boss, we need to talk. About the girl's background check." Piccio's eyes never left mine. "What about it?" "There are gaps, inconsistencies, things that don't add up." I felt the walls closing in around me, the careful life I'd built crumbling like sand. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Marco looked at Piccio, who nodded once. "Your employment history, the references you provided. They're real, but they're not complete. Someone's been very careful to hide parts of your past." "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. There were things I'd hidden, things I'd hoped would never surface. But I'd never imagined they'd be discovered by someone like Piccio. "Is it?" Piccio stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us. "Tell me, Miss McGowen, what else are you hiding? What other secrets are buried in that carefully constructed past of yours?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, there were secrets. Things I'd done, choices I'd made, people I'd trusted who turned out to be something else entirely. And now, standing in this room with a man who controlled half the city looking at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, I realized that my past wasn't just catching up with me. It was about to destroy everything I'd tried to build. The interrogation ended without resolution, leaving me suspended in a limbo of suspicion and unanswered questions. Piccio dismissed me with a warning that felt more like a threat. "Stay close to Matteo, and remember, I'm watching." Over the next few days, I began to notice things I'd been too naive or too desperate to see before. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room, the coded language the men used when they thought I wasn't listening, the stream of visitors who arrived at odd hours, their expensive cars purring up the circular drive like predators approaching prey. "Territories need to be realigned," I heard Marco say to Piccio as I dusted the hallway outside his office. "The Castellis are pushing back on the waterfront deal." "Then we push harder," came Piccio's reply, his voice carrying the kind of casual authority that made my skin crawl. "Remind them who owns the permits for their construction projects." I froze. my cloth suspended over a crystal figurine, construction projects, permits. The pieces began clicking together like a puzzle I'd been too blind to see. This wasn't just wealth. This was control. Systematic, far-reaching control that extended far beyond the mansion's walls. "The police chief called," another voice added. "He's concerned about the federal attention on the Port Authority. Tell Chief Morrison his concerns are noted, and remind him who paid for his daughter's wedding." My hands trembled as I continued dusting, each word painting a clearer picture of the world I'd stumbled into. Piccio didn't just have money. He had politicians, police, entire industries dancing to his tune. The city wasn't just his home. It was his kingdom. That evening, as I helped Matteo with his dinner, he chattered about his day with the innocent obliviousness of childhood. "Papa had lots of meetings today," he said, stabbing at his pasta with more enthusiasm than skill. "Important men in suits. They always look scared when they talk to Papa." "Do they?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Uh-huh. But Papa says that's just business. He says when you're in charge, people expect you to be serious." Matteo looked up at me with those dark eyes so much like his father's. "Are you scared of Papa, Layla?" The question caught me off guard. Was I scared? Terrified was more accurate. But looking at this sweet child, I realized my fear wasn't just for myself anymore. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I'm not scared of you." He smiled, that radiant expression that could light up the darkest corners of this mansion. "Good, because you're my favorite person in the whole house." The words hit me like a physical blow. This child, this innocent boy, had become attached to me in a way that felt both precious and dangerous. In a world where his father controlled everything through fear and power, Matteo had chosen to trust the one person who had no protection to offer. Later that night, unable to sleep, I wandered the mansion's halls. The place felt different in darkness, less like a home and more like a fortress. I found myself in the portrait gallery, studying the faces of past Piccio generations by moonlight. Each one looked carved from the same stone as Oliviero, their eyes holding secrets that had been passed down like heirlooms. That's when I saw it. A smaller portrait tucked between two larger ones, almost hidden in the shadows. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding a baby. The resemblance to Matteo was unmistakable. She was beautiful, wasn't she? I spun around to find Piccio standing in the doorway, his white shirt open at the collar, his usual armor of formality stripped away. In the moonlight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I couldn't sleep and It's fine." He moved to stand beside me, his gaze fixed on the portrait. "Her name was Isabella, Matteo's mother." The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. This was the man beneath the mask, the father who'd lost everything that mattered. "She looks like she was kind," I said softly. "She was. Too kind for this world. Too kind for me." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "She drowned in that pool 3 years ago. Same pool where you saved my son." The revelation hit me like ice water. "I'm so sorry." "Are you?" He turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face in the dim light. "Or are you exactly what someone wants me to believe you are?" "I don't understand." "Isabella's death wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to hurt me, to take away what I loved most. They succeeded." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Now someone's trying to finish what they started." The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. "You think whoever sent that note killed your wife?" I think my enemies are patient. I think they've been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. And I think you appearing in my house just weeks before someone tries to kill my son is more than coincidence. I would never hurt Mateo, I said fiercely. Never. Then prove it. Tell me who you really are, Layla McGowen. Tell me what you're hiding. The question hung between us like a blade, because he was right. I was hiding something. Not what he thought, not some conspiracy to hurt his family, but something that could destroy the fragile trust we'd built. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Marco appeared, his face grim in the moonlight. Boss, we have a problem. The background check on Miss McGowen came back with some interesting information. Piccio's eyes never left mine. What kind of information? The kind that suggests she's not who she says she is. My heart hammered against my ribs as both men stared at me, waiting for an explanation I couldn't give. Because the truth was more complicated than they could imagine, and more dangerous than any lie I could tell. I can explain, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I could. You'd better, Piccio said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Because if you're lying to me, if you're here to hurt my son, there won't be anywhere in this city you can hide. The threat was clear, and looking into his eyes, I knew he meant every word. Oliviero Piccio owned half this city, controlled more lives than I could count, and commanded loyalty through fear and respect in equal measure. And I was about to tell him the one truth that could turn him from protector to enemy in the space of a heartbeat. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. I opened my mouth to explain, to tell them about the witness protection program that had given me a new identity after testifying against my brother's associates when the lights went out. Not just dimmed, completely black, as if someone had thrown a switch on the entire mansion. Emergency lighting flickered on a second later, casting everything in an eerie red glow that made the portrait gallery look like a scene from hell. Get down, Piccio commanded, his voice cutting through the darkness with military precision. His hand found my arm, pulling me behind a marble pillar just as the first gunshot shattered the night. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the mansion as windows exploded inward. Shouts erupted from different parts of the house, Piccio's men responding to the attack with practiced efficiency. But there were other voices too, harsh and unfamiliar, barking orders in accents I couldn't place. Mateo, I gasped, my heart hammering against my ribs. Where is he? Safe room, Marco said, appearing beside us with a rifle in his hands. Harrison got him there when the perimeter alarms went off. Another burst of gunfire, closer this time. The attackers were inside the house. How many? Piccio asked, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos erupting around us. At least a dozen. Maybe more. They came over the east wall, took out the guards there first. Marco's face was grim in the red light. This isn't random, boss. They know the layout, know our protocols. Inside job, Piccio said, and his eyes found mine in the darkness. The accusation was clear, even unspoken. It's not me, I whispered fiercely. I swear to you, it's not me. Before he could respond, footsteps pounded down the hallway toward us. 3 men in black tactical gear rounded the corner, automatic weapons raised. Marco moved like lightning, his rifle barking twice. 2 of the attackers dropped, but the third got off a burst that sent marble chips flying from the pillar inches from my head. Piccio's gun appeared in his hand as if by magic, the shot precise and final. The third attacker crumpled to the floor, his weapon clattering across the marble. The safe room, Piccio said to Marco. "Make sure it's secure." "Boss, you need to get out of here. Let us handle this." "No." Piccio's voice brooked no argument. "This is my house. My family. I'm not running." More gunfire erupted from the direction of the main staircase. Someone was shouting orders. "Find the boy! End the bloodline!" The words sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just an attack on Piccio. It was an attempt to wipe out his entire family. To kill Matteo. "I'm going to him," I said, starting toward the safe room. Piccio's hand caught my wrist, his grip like iron. "You're staying with me." "He's terrified. He needs to stay alive. And so do you." His dark eyes bored into mine. "Until I know who's behind this, you don't leave my sight." The sound of splintering wood came from somewhere below us, followed by more shouts. The attackers were systematic, methodical, searching room by room. They weren't here to steal or send a message. They were here to kill. We moved through the mansion like ghosts, Piccio leading with the confidence of a man who knew every shadow, every hiding place. The red emergency lighting turned everything into a nightmare landscape of blood and darkness. Bodies lay scattered in the hallways. Some Piccio's men, some the attackers. The marble floors were slick with blood. "The wine cellar," Piccio said quietly. "There's another way to the safe room from there." We descended the servants' stairs, the sounds of battle growing muffled but not distant. In the wine cellar, surrounded by bottles worth more than most people's houses, Piccio moved to what looked like a solid stone wall. His fingers found a hidden mechanism, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. "Isabella's idea," he said, noticing my surprise. She was always worried about Matteo's safety. The passage was cramped and dark, lit only by small LED strips along the floor. We moved in single file, the sounds of the attack echoing strangely through the stone walls. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and rapid, mixing with the distant gunfire. The passage ended at another hidden door. Piccio pressed his ear against it, listening, then slowly opened it a crack. We were behind the safe room, a reinforced chamber hidden behind his office bookshelf. Through the gap, I could see Harrison sitting with Matteo, the older man's usually perfect composure cracked with worry. Matteo was curled in a corner, his small body shaking with each distant gunshot. When he saw me through the crack in the door, his face lit up with relief. "Layla," he whispered, reaching for me. I slipped through the opening and gathered him into my arms, feeling his small body trembling against mine. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." I was scared, he whispered against my neck. "The loud noises, they sound like thunder, but angry thunder." "I know, baby, but you're safe now. Your papa's here, and he's going to make sure nothing happens to you." Piccio entered the safe room behind me, his presence immediately filling the small space. He looked at his son in my arms, and for a moment his mask slipped completely. The powerful man who controlled half the city was just a father, terrified of losing the only family he had left. "How long can we stay here?" I asked. "As long as necessary," Harrison replied. "The room is self-contained, air filtration, communications, enough supplies for a week if needed." But even as he spoke, we could hear the attackers getting closer. Voices in the hallway outside the office, searching, calling to each other. They were being thorough, checking every room, every hiding place. "Find the boy!" The voice was clearer now, just outside the office door. "He has to be here somewhere." Matteo whimpered against my shoulder, and I held him tighter, my hand covering his ear to muffle the sounds. Piccio moved to the safe room's communication panel, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. 5 minutes, he said when he finished. Reinforcements are 5 minutes out. A crash came from the office, furniture being overturned, books being thrown from shelves. They were destroying everything, looking for hidden passages, secret doors. It was only a matter of time before they found the entrance to the safe room. "Papa," Matteo whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are the bad men going to hurt us?" Piccio knelt beside us, his hand gentle on his son's head. "No, Matteo. I promise you, no one is going to hurt you. Not while I'm alive." The certainty in his voice was absolute, and looking into his eyes, I believed him. This man would die before he let anyone harm his child. The question was whether that would be enough. A new sound reached us through the walls, the distinctive crack of the bookshelf mechanism being discovered. Someone had found the entrance to the safe room. "Get behind me," Piccio ordered, his gun appearing in his hand again. "Both of you." I pulled Matteo deeper into the corner, shielding his small body with mine as the hidden door began to swing open. Through the gap, I could see the barrel of an assault rifle, then a face hidden behind a tactical mask. The next few seconds stretched like hours. The attacker's weapon swung toward us, his finger tightening on the trigger. Piccio's gun rose to meet the threat, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of sirens finally began to wail through the night. But 5 minutes might as well have been 5 hours when death was measured in heartbeats. The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting pain, expecting darkness. Instead, I heard the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. When I opened my eyes, the attacker lay motionless in the doorway, Piccio's smoking gun still trained on the entrance. "Stay down," he commanded, but his voice was gentler now, meant for Matteo, who was sobbing quietly against my chest. The sounds of battle were changing. More sirens, closer now. Shouts of retreat echoing through the mansion's halls. Whatever reinforcements Piccio had called were turning the tide. 20 minutes later, the emergency lighting gave way to normal illumination. The attack was over, but the mansion looked like a war zone. Bullet holes scarred the marble walls, priceless artwork lay shredded on the floor, and the metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. I sat in Piccio's office, Matteo finally asleep in my lap, his small fist clutching my shirt even in slumber. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me shaky and hollow. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rifle barrel swinging toward us, felt the certainty that we were about to die. Piccio stood by the window, surveying the damage to his estate. His white shirt was torn and stained with blood, not his own, I hoped. In the morning light, he looked older, more worn, as if the attack had stripped away another layer of his carefully constructed armor. 7 dead, Marco reported, entering the office with a tablet in his hands. 4 of ours, 3 of theirs. The rest got away when the cavalry arrived. Identification on the attackers? Working on it. But boss. Marco hesitated, glancing at me. We need to talk about the background check. Piccio's eyes found mine across the room. Now's as good a time as any. Miss McGowen isn't going anywhere. Marco pulled up files on his tablet, his expression grim. Layla McGowen exists, but her history has been scrubbed. Professional job, the kind the feds do for witness protection. My stomach dropped. The secret I'd been guarding so carefully was unraveling in real time. Her real name is Layla Morrison. She testified against the Torino crime family 3 years ago. Her brother Marcus wasn't just some desperate kid who robbed a convenience store. He was running drugs for Vincent Torino until he got caught. Piccio turned from the window, his face unreadable. Continue. She was supposed to testify about the family's operations, but the case fell apart when key evidence disappeared. The feds relocated her anyway, gave her a new identity. Marco looked directly at me. The question is, why did she end up here? In your house, just weeks before an attack that has all the hallmarks of Torino's style? The silence that followed was suffocating. Matteo stirred in my arms, and I adjusted my hold on him, using the movement to buy myself a few precious seconds to think. It's not what you think, I said finally. Then tell me what it is. Piccio's voice was deadly quiet. Tell me why a federal witness with connections to the Torino family is caring for my son. I looked down at Matteo's peaceful face, then back at the two men who held my fate in their hands. Because I had nowhere else to go. Explain. The witness protection program gave me a new identity, but they couldn't give me a new life. I was supposed to disappear, start over somewhere safe. But Vincent Torino has a long memory and longer reach. 3 different cities, 3 different jobs. Somehow, he always found me. I shifted Matteo carefully, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The last time, they didn't just threaten me. They went after an innocent family I was working for. A little girl got hurt because of me, because I brought danger into their home. Piccio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. So I stopped running to safe places and started running to dangerous ones. Figured if I was going to bring trouble, better to bring it somewhere that could handle it. You came here deliberately, Marco said, knowing who Piccio was. I knew he was powerful. I knew he had enemies. I swallowed hard. I thought maybe in a house full of dangerous men, one more target wouldn't matter. But you didn't count on caring about the boy, Piccio said, and it wasn't a question. No, I didn't count on that. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face for deception. The Torinos and I have history, old grudges, territorial disputes. If they knew you were here, they'd use me to get to you, I finished. I know. That's why I never told you. I thought if I kept my head down, did my job, maybe they'd never find me here. But they did find you. Marco's voice was hard. And now they've used you to get inside information about this house, about our security. No. The word came out sharper than I intended, waking Matteo slightly. I lowered my voice. I never gave them anything. I swear to you, I never. Then how did they know our protocols? How did they know exactly where to hit us? I don't know. Tears of frustration burned my eyes. Maybe they've been watching longer than we think. Maybe they have other sources. But it wasn't me. Piccio moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the morning light. If I asked you to betray Vincent Torino to save Matteo, would you? The question hung in the air like a blade. I looked down at the child in my arms, this innocent boy who'd become more precious to me than my own safety. Yes, I whispered, without hesitation. The honesty of it seemed to surprise him. He studied my face for another long moment, then turned to Marco. Double the security, change all the protocols, and put a trace on every communication that's gone in or out of this house in the past month. Boss, what about her? Piccio looked at me again, his expression unreadable. She stays. For now. Marco started to protest, but Piccio cut him off with a look. She had a dozen chances to hurt Matteo and chose to protect him instead. That counts for something. After Marco left, the office fell quiet except for Matteo's soft breathing. Piccio sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. "You've complicated things, Layla Morrison," he said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you exactly what I need right now? Someone who understands what it means to be hunted?" I didn't have an answer for that, but as I sat there holding his son, watching the morning light play across his tired features, I realized that somewhere in this mansion of secrets and shadows, I'd found something I'd never expected. A place where my past might finally stop chasing me. 3 days after the attack, Piccio's men found him. Vittorio Lanza, the industrialist who'd been quietly building his own empire in the shadows of the city's legitimate businesses. The man who'd ordered the drowning attempt, who'd sent killers into our home, who'd tried to end a child's life to settle old scores. He's holed up in his penthouse. Marco reported during the morning briefing I wasn't supposed to overhear. Thinks his money and connections will protect him. "They won't," Piccio said, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. I was in the kitchen with Matteo, helping him with breakfast, when Piccio appeared in the doorway. He'd traded his usual business attire for something darker, more practical. The sight sent a chill down my spine. "I need you to come with me," he said. "Where?" But even as I asked, I knew. The look in his eyes, the careful way he was dressed. This was about Lanza. "You need to see what protection costs." Matteo looked up from his cereal, sensing the tension. "Where are you going, Papa?" "Business. Little one. Layla will be back soon." Piccio's voice softened when he spoke to his son, but his eyes never left mine. "Won't you, Layla?" It wasn't really a question. I kissed Matteo's forehead, promised him I'd be back for lunch, and followed Piccio to the waiting car. The drive through the city was silent, but I could feel the weight of what was coming pressing down on me like a physical force. Lanza's building was a monument to new money, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a middle finger to the old families who'd built their power in shadows. We rode the private elevator to the penthouse in silence, Piccio's men flanking us like an honor guard. The elevator doors opened directly into Lanza's apartment, a sprawling space that screamed wealth and insecurity in equal measure. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, as if Lanza needed constant reminder of everything he was trying to control. He was waiting for us in the living room, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from too much time on yachts. But his composure cracked the moment he saw Piccio step off the elevator. "Oliviero," he said, trying for casual and missing by miles. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" Piccio moved into the room with predatory grace, his men spreading out to cover the exits. "You tried to kill my son, Vittorio. Did you think I wouldn't come calling?" "I don't know what you're talking about." But Lanza's eyes kept darting to the windows, as if he was calculating the distance to the ground 40 floors below. "The drowning attempt, the attack on my home, the note." Piccio's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Did you really think I wouldn't trace it back to you?" I stood frozen by the elevator, watching this dance of power and fear play out. This was Piccio's world, not the mansion with its marble halls and family portraits, but this, the place where debts were collected and scores were settled with blood. "You can't prove anything," Lanza said, but his voice was shaking now. "I don't need to prove anything. This isn't a courtroom, Vittorio. This is justice." Piccio moved closer, and I saw Lanza flinch. "You want to know why I brought her?" He gestured toward me without looking away from his target. "Because she saved my son's life. because she threw herself into that pool without thinking, without hesitation, to pull him out of the water you tried to drown him in. It wasn't supposed to be the boy, Lanza said quickly, the words tumbling out in his desperation. It was supposed to be you. You were supposed to be by the pool that night, not him. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Piccio went very still, and I felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. So you admit it? I admit nothing. I'm just saying. You're saying you tried to kill me and got my son instead. Piccio's voice was barely above a whisper now, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. You're saying you would have let a 6-year-old boy drown to get to me? Business is business, Oliviero. You know that better than anyone. Business. Piccio repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you call murdering children? I watched in horrified fascination as Piccio transformed before my eyes. The man who'd sat with his son at breakfast, who'd held Matteo during the attack, who'd shown me glimpses of vulnerability in quiet moments, that man disappeared. In his place stood something colder, more dangerous, a predator who'd been patient too long. Please, Lanza said, backing toward the windows. We can work something out. I have money, connections. I can be useful to you. You were useful to me. Past tense. Piccio's gun appeared in his hand with fluid grace. Now you're just a problem that needs solving. Wait! Lanza's voice cracked. It wasn't my idea. Someone else is pulling the strings. Someone who wants you destroyed. I was just the tool. Who? I don't know. They contacted me through intermediaries, offered me territory in exchange for taking you down. I never met them face to face. Piccio studied him for a long moment, then pulled the trigger. The sound was sharp and final in the enclosed space. Lanza crumpled to the floor, his blood spreading across the white marble like spilled wine. I must have made a sound. A gasp, a whimper, because Piccio turned to look at me. His face was calm, almost serene, as if he'd just finished a particularly satisfying meal. Now you understand, he said quietly. This is what I am. This is what it takes to protect what matters. I stared at him, this man who'd just killed someone with the same casual efficiency he used to cut his morning eggs. My hands were shaking, my stomach churning with a mixture of horror and something else I didn't want to name. He tried to kill your son, I whispered. Yes. He would have let Matteo drown. Yes. I looked at Lanza's body, then back at Piccio. Good. The word surprised us both. But as it hung in the air between us, I realized I meant it. This man had tried to murder a child, had sent killers into our home, had threatened the innocent boy who'd become the center of my world. Now you understand why I can't thank you, Piccio said, holstering his gun. Gratitude is weakness in my world, but respect. He moved closer, his dark eyes searching my face. Respect is something else entirely. As we rode the elevator down, leaving Lanza's body for his men to clean up, I realized that something fundamental had shifted between us. I'd seen him at his most dangerous, most ruthless, and I hadn't run, hadn't judged, hadn't turned away. I'd accepted it, accepted him, accepted what loving Matteo meant in a world where protection came at the cost of blood. The days following Lanza's death passed in strange normalcy. The mansion was repaired, new security measures installed, and life resumed its careful rhythm. But something had changed between Piccio and me, an understanding that went deeper than words, forged in blood and shared danger. Matteo seemed to sense it too. He moved between us with the easy confidence of a child who felt truly safe for the first time since his mother's death. During meals, he'd chatter about his lessons while Piccio and I exchanged glances over his head, a silent communication that felt more intimate than any conversation. It was Tuesday evening when everything changed again. I was reading to Matteo in his room, his small body curled against my side as we worked through a story about brave knights and distant kingdoms. His breathing had grown slow and even, and I was about to close the book when Harrison appeared in the doorway. "Miss McGowen, Mr. Piccio would like to see you in his study." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. This wasn't a casual summons. I tucked Matteo under his covers, kissed his forehead, and followed Harrison through the quiet halls. Piccio's study was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the desk lamp that cast a golden circle over two objects lying on the leather surface: passports. I could see them clearly as I approached, the deep blue covers, the gold embossing that marked them as official documents. "Sit," Piccio said without looking up from the papers he was reviewing. I took the chair across from his desk, my eyes fixed on those passports. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "What are those?" "Your freedom." He finally looked up, his dark eyes unreadable in the lamplight. "Yours and your brother's. New identities, clean backgrounds, enough money to start over anywhere in the world." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" He leaned back in his chair, studying my face with that intensity I'd come to know so well. "You've done enough, Layla. More than enough. You saved my son's life, protected him during the attack, stood by us when you could have run. But this isn't your world, and it's not your fight. What about Matteo? What about him? He needs—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. What could I say? That he needed me? That I'd become as essential to his happiness as air or water? "He trusts me. He'll have guards, tutors, everything he needs to grow up safe and strong." Piccio's voice was carefully neutral, but I caught something underneath. Pain, maybe, or regret. "He doesn't need a woman who brings federal attention and old enemies to his door." "Is that what you think I am? A liability?" "I think you're a good woman who got caught up in something bigger than herself. I think you deserve a chance at a normal life, away from all this." He gestured around the study, encompassing not just the room, but everything it represented. The power, the violence, the constant threat of death. I stared at the passports, those small blue books that represented escape from everything I'd been running from. A new name, a new life, a chance to disappear completely from Vincent Torino's reach. It was everything I'd dreamed of during those long nights when I'd wondered if I'd ever be truly safe. "And if I don't want to go, then you're a fool." But there was no heat in his words, only a tired sadness that made my chest ache. Maybe I am. I met his eyes across the desk, seeing my own reflection in their dark depths. "But I'm not leaving him." "He's not your son, Layla." The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But they also crystallized something I'd been feeling but hadn't been able to name. "No, he's not. But he's the closest thing to family I've had since my brother was arrested. And you?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to continue. "You can control half this city, Piccio. You can make politicians dance and police chiefs bow, but you can't control who he trusts. You can't control who he loves." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Love is dangerous in my world." "Everything is dangerous in your world. That doesn't make it less real." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk in a rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. You don't know what you're asking for. This life, this world, it changes people. It takes pieces of your soul and never gives them back. I know what I saw in that penthouse. I know what you did to protect your family. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the desk between us. And I know that despite everything, the violence, the blood, the darkness, you're still the man who sits with his son during thunderstorms and reads him bedtime stories in 3 different languages. That man is a luxury I can't afford. That man is the reason Mateo laughs instead of just surviving. That man is the reason I'm not taking those passports and running as far as I can. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Outside, I could hear the distant sounds of the city, traffic, sirens, the endless pulse of life that continued regardless of the decisions being made in this quiet room. You've changed the rhythm of my house, Layla McGowen, Piccio said finally, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. Maybe that's more dangerous than any bullet. Maybe it is. I stood up, leaving the passports untouched on his desk. But some changes are worth the risk. I was almost to the door when his voice stopped me. If you stay, there's no going back. No more running, no more hiding. You'll be part of this family, with everything that entails. The protection and the danger, the loyalty and the cost. I turned back to face him, this man who'd become so much more than an employer, so much more than the dangerous stranger who'd questioned my motives by a blood-stained pool. I stopped running the night I pulled your son out of that water, I said. I just didn't realize it until now. He nodded slowly, something like relief flickering across his features. Then welcome to the family, Layla Morrison. God help us both. As I walked back through the mansion's halls, past the portraits of past generations and the marble columns that had witnessed so much history, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. A sense of belonging I'd never expected to find in a house built on secrets and shadows. I'd made my choice. Now I had to live with the consequences. 6 months later, morning sunlight streamed across the estate like liquid gold, transforming the same pool that had once been a place of terror into something beautiful again. I stood on the terrace, a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching Mateo play in the shallow end with the easy confidence of a child who'd reclaimed his joy. The water no longer held power over him. We'd worked through his fear together, one careful step at a time, until the pool became just water again. Something to splash in, not something to dread. His laughter echoed across the courtyard, bright and pure, a sound that had become the soundtrack of our transformed life. He's gotten taller, Piccio said, appearing beside me with his own coffee. The morning ritual had become ours. These quiet moments before the day's business began, when we could simply be a family watching a child play. 3 inches since Christmas, I agreed, smiling as Mateo attempted an elaborate dive that ended in a spectacular belly flop. Dr. Martinelli says he's perfectly healthy. No lasting effects from that night. And you? Piccio's voice was softer now, concerned. Any lasting effects? I considered the question seriously. The nightmares had faded. The constant looking over my shoulder had eased. Vincent Torino was in federal prison now, his organization dismantled by a combination of Piccio's influence and my testimony. The past that had chased me for so long had finally been laid to rest. Only the good ones, I said honestly. Mateo spotted us on the terrace and waved enthusiastically, water streaming from his dark hair. Layla! Papa! Watch this." He proceeded to demonstrate a swimming stroke that was more enthusiasm than technique, his small arms churning through the water with determined joy. When he reached the pool's edge, he hauled himself out and ran to us, dripping and grinning. "Did you see? I swam the whole way without stopping." "I saw, sweetheart. You were magnificent." I wrapped him in the towel I'd learned to keep ready, ruffling his wet hair as he leaned against my legs. "Papa, did you see too?" "I did." Piccio's hand found his son's shoulder, the gesture automatic now, natural. "I'm proud of you." The simple words made Matteo beam with happiness. In the months since I'd chosen to stay, I'd watched their relationship transform as well. Piccio had learned to be present, to show affection, to be the father Matteo needed rather than just the protector he required. It hadn't been easy. Old habits died hard, especially when those habits had kept them both alive. But love, I'd discovered, was stronger than fear when given the chance to grow. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" Matteo asked, looking between us with hopeful eyes. "If Layla doesn't mind making them," Piccio said, and there was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. A nervousness I rarely saw, as if he was building up to something important. "I never mind," I said, meaning it. Cooking for them had become one of my greatest pleasures, these domestic moments that felt miraculous after so much chaos. "Good," Matteo said, satisfied. "I'm going to get dressed. Don't start without me." He scampered toward the house, leaving wet footprints on the stone terrace. I started to follow, but Piccio's hand on my arm stopped me. "Wait," he said quietly. I turned back to him, noting the way the morning light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, the way his usually confident posture seemed slightly uncertain. "What is it?" "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, the kind that made my heart skip several beats. "Oliviero," I breathed, staring at the box as if it might explode. "I know this isn't conventional. I know our beginning was anything but normal." He opened the box to reveal a ring that took my breath away, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless. "But somewhere between that first night by the pool and this morning, you became essential to my life, to our life." I looked up at his face, seeing vulnerability there that he rarely allowed anyone to witness. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to be my partner in everything. My wife, Matteo's mother, my equal in this complicated life we've built together." His voice was steady, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm asking you to make it official. This family we've become." The ring caught the sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across my hands as I reached for it with trembling fingers. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger with hands that were surprisingly gentle for someone capable of such violence. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me, as if this moment had been inevitable from the night I'd first pulled his son from the water. "Layla!" Matteo's voice called from the house. "Are you coming? I'm hungry." We looked at each other and laughed, the sound mixing with the distant noise of the city beyond the estate walls. This was our life now, moments of profound emotion interrupted by the practical demands of raising a child, the extraordinary made ordinary by love. "We should tell him," I said, admiring the way the ring looked on my hand. "Tell him what? That you're going to be his mother officially? He's been calling you Mama for months when he thinks we can't hear." The revelation made my heart swell with happiness so pure it was almost painful. Has he really? Really. Usually when he's talking to his toys or reading his books. Mama said this. Mama thinks that. Piccio's smile was soft, transformative. He chose you long before I worked up the courage to ask. We walked toward the house together, my hand in his, the ring a warm weight on my finger. Through the windows, I could see Matteo in the kitchen, already pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with the confidence of a child who knew he was loved and safe. Half this city obeys me, Piccio said quietly as we reached the terrace doors. But the only ones who ever made me feel truly alive are right here. I squeezed his hand, thinking of the journey that had brought us to this moment. The fear, the danger, the secrets that had nearly destroyed us before they brought us together. The pool that had been a place of death and was now a place of joy. The mansion that had been a fortress and was now a home. I love you too, I said simply. Inside, Matteo was attempting to crack eggs into a bowl, his tongue poking out in concentration. When he saw us, his face lit up with the kind of pure happiness that made everything we'd endured worthwhile. There you are. I started without you, but I didn't break any shells this time. Good job, sweetheart, I said, moving to help him while Piccio watched from the doorway, his expression soft with contentment. This was our family. Unconventional, complicated, born from chaos and forged in fire. But it was ours, and it was real, and it was worth every risk we'd taken to protect it. As I helped Matteo measure flour and Piccio set the table, the morning sun streaming through the windows and the sound of laughter filling the air, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most terrifying moments. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as catastrophe, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, the life you never knew you wanted finds you in the last place you ever thought to look. Ready to dive into your own story of unexpected love, dangerous secrets, and the courage to fight for what matters most? Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen when we stop running from our past and start building our future. What would you risk everything to protect?